in important issues.
Good evening. I'll start by just acknowledging that we're on the land of the Wurundjeri people. And one of the things that strike me about being an Australian now, I've been here just over 5 years, is that if there was people say, will you stay? And because I'm married to an Australian, I've got one Australian kid and one born in Liverpool. And I keep thinking, I would if I could just come to terms with our treatment of Indigenous people. I just feel so embarrassed to be Australian. And what's striking for me then, given how much I feel that, is how little it is part of our life in terms of doing something about it. So I'll acknowledge that we're on the land of the Wurundjeri people and any elders present. Maybe once upon a time they sat here as elders, defining the rules of how they would be together. And those elders would be in that position because they were given that, because of the way they were, because of the way they held themselves. So we'll try and sit in that tradition a little bit. So, thank you. I feel really unworthy, to be speaking to you. And thank you for your very gracious introduction. But it's I was thinking about coming to a bunch of people who have spent years playing with reason and argument. All that stuff in your brain that says, yeah, but you can say it that way and it would mean something else. And if you said it that way, or you put the full stop there and not there, then maybe it meant that. And I am just so, I don't even know the word for it. You see, I'm so opposite to that kind of finesse for words or for argument. If it's real, it's happening. If it's not happening, guess what? I don't give a shit. Or I don't care. So I then thought for quite some time about coming to speak and thinking, well, I tell stories. I'm a storyteller, and I'm an entrepreneur. I do business, I do deals. I like doing that. And I'm a priest because I'm passionate about love. Not because I believe Mary was a virgin or those things. I'm a priest because I'm passionate about love, and I think it's our role as pastors, as priests, to hold a space where there might be more love in the world. So how do you come along to a place where argument and reason, if you haven't thought, I don't think I've thought it enough. I got kicked out of school. I failed everything. I don't have any qualifications. I'm a good bullshitter, but that's what maybe I'd be all right actually as a QC, but I'm a good bullshitter. That's what I do well. I tell good stories. And then I thought, but then maybe the reason people were here is because they're passionate about love. They're passionate about a world where it's fair, where people get to be able to work out, importantly, tightly, with finesse, get to work out arguments so that we might be more loving, so that it might be an environment, a gracious environment. And I thought, no, that can't be the case. These are lawyers. No. And so I kind of imagined myself speaking to people and thinking, I'm over here in this world and it's about poverty and about people, and that's what I care about. And over here, you don't care about those things, really. You're over here, you're sat there, and you're just waiting to be able to catch me out and show me how stupid I really am, which I already believe. And then I realized that then, I know nothing, do I? And when I imagined you all like that, you all had wigs on, you were all wearing colored robes, and you all were going to judge me before I started. And then I remembered, probably the reason that you're here is that you're passionate about the world. The reason you trained is you're passionate about the world, passionate about people, passionate about fairness. So when I remember that, I'm happy to stand here and make a mistake, which is what I'll do. Because I was being so worried, I've changed what I was going to say 1,000 times, but I did rewrite it on the tram here, so I'm now quite confident in what I'm going to say. And I thought I would want to talk, for me, about somebody who relied on the rules. I was a son of a very successful businessman, and then I was a stockbroker for a while, and I was in London as a marketeer, making lots and lots of money, and And I relied on the rules of the game, playing the game to do well, and knowing how to use the game, manipulate it. And the rules were there to play with, not to hold me back, that I might hold others back so that I could get in front. So the rules were mine. And then after a while, I realized that although I had all the rules and they were bringing me some money and the right clubs and those kind of things, I also was extraordinarily lonely because I was using the rules daily to get my way in my relationship with whoever it was that I happened to be with at that time, my way to win at work so that my commission might be greater than anyone else. And I used the rules well and keenly. And I was telling someone today I would do this who actually studied law, and he said, the law's a game for the rich to fight and play over the spoils of the rich. And that's all it's for. Now, I'm not a lawyer. But it's a cynical look at what we might, this picture, this freeing of reason for justice. So I was also a Thatcherite. I was a chairman of the Conservative Party when I was at Portsmouth Polytechnic. And I was passionate about the rules, and particularly the rules that would allow me to prove myself as a great entrepreneur in Britain, and it would allow me to do well and make lots of money. And at the same time, I was passionate about, and I remember I used to stand on podiums as the chairman of the Conservative Party in a predominantly sort of sea of red, at a very left-wing Portsmouth Polytechnic. The only reason I went there is because I'd failed everything with no qualifications. It's the only place where I could do anything after A-levels at the age of 18 on the planet, and Portsmouth was it. And it's now a very fine university, they tell me. It was then not a very... Anyway, so I would stand there and I'd say, if you're unemployed, get on your bike and get a job. You're probably just cheating on your welfare. You're probably just screwing us all anyway. We're doling this out to you and you're doing nothing. And I would do it with a finger and point. Believed it. My grandfather was in a prisoner of war for 5 years in Japan. He didn't see my dad until my dad was 5 years of age. Before that, he was brought up by his mother, who was a single mum living on the top floor of a pub. He came back with absolutely nothing. He started a pub with his wife from the money that she saved, and they built a business, and he died a millionaire. And these lazy bastards need to do the same. If he could do it, if he could spend 5 years in a prisoner of war camp, seeing his friends die, then you can do it. Arguing. Strong argument. And I was, at that time in the 80s, an argument that, had real resonance in government. The country was going in that direction. And I made the big impact for me was realizing with all this pointing how lonely you are. There's lots of people to point at. And I made some changes in my life. And I ended up in Liverpool. And I ended up giving up my job and selling my house and paying off the debts that I was accumulating along the back of house prices going up. And I moved to Liverpool, and I did nothing for a year. I was a volunteer. And during that time, I just did a few things. And one of the things I did was I ran a youth club in the local church in a place called Granby in Toxteth. And Toxteth is kind of the black ghetto of Liverpool. 90%, 95% unemployment, big Somali community, big African community, and huge poverty. And so I was living in Granby. I was living in Granby Street, working at the local church, and and getting all the nicknames that you can imagine as being this guy that had come from where he'd come from to live there. But I ran this youth club, and there was a whole bunch of kids that came, and all of the kids were black. So there's this white, tall guy, looking like he doesn't really belong in Granby, with a whole bunch of kids, and we'd go places. And one of the things that struck me was I would take these kids where I had been used to going. And I remembered taking them on a trip on a boat, and and actually it was interesting. I just raised the money, and we took him on a trip. It was a canal barge, and I'm on this canal barge, of which everybody said it's too expensive to take them on this holiday. You should have just raised less money. It's too much money to spend on them. But anyway, we're on this this barge, my wife and I and these kids. We're going along, and over the week of being on the barge, people from other barges would shout at me. One woman shouted at me, "Nigger lover." I'd never come across it. I pointed my finger, but I'd never seen it. They weren't talking at them, they were talking at me, just for being here. Never experienced it. Anyway, one of these niggers was a guy called Marcel Smith. And Marcel's, his father was African Liverpudlian, and his mum was white Liverpudlian. And Marcel had a younger sister, Beverly, and a little brother, Winston. And Marcel's mum used to work in the peanut factory, shelling the peanuts and then putting them into bags in Granby, in Toxteth. And each of the kids had a different father. And so Marcel and Beverly used to come to the school. And one day, Marcel turns up. And Marcel, the house pays for the bills because Marcel, at the age of 11, has got a job. He's also at school, but he's got a job. And his job is that he lives in Granby Street, and he runs the drugs on his push bike for the drug dealers. So somebody phones up, they do a deal, he gets on his bike, he screams this, whatever it is that somebody's brought down to their house, picks up the money and goes back. Marcel's a tall lad, and 11 or 12 years of age, would take on anyone. He is not in school because every teacher that's come up to him and said, Marcel, sit down, he stood up, bang, floored him, bang. Because his whole family's existence relied on the fact that no one would touch him when he was on the bike. Because otherwise they wouldn't pay him the £5 per trick to go and deliver it. So he'd been kicked out of every inner city school. So I have Marcel come along, and Marcel and I just got on really, really well. Anyway, one day Marcel arrives, he's on a push bike. And he comes in, and it's brand, well, it looks to me, it's brand new, beautiful, 21 gears, Shimano brakes, back suspension, the business. I'm saying to Marcel, Marcel, where'd you get it? Knowing, knowing that he doesn't get the money. He gives all this money he makes from this to his mum, so I know he hasn't bought this bike. He said, I nicked it, but don't worry, Nick. And I'm saying, Marcel, you can't do that. You are really going to end up, you're going to end up in prison. And he's saying, no, it's fine. I'm saying, no, it's not fine. He said, no, really, it's fine. I nicked it from Toorak. Walton, actually, but, Walton, it's the same deal. I nicked it from Toorak, it's all right. I'm saying, it doesn't make it all right. No, he said, it does make it all right. And I said, Marcel, it doesn't. He said, look, I've done the boy a favor. Marcel, honestly, that boy's going to be upset. Look, Nick, he'll come home tonight. It was a double garage, it was open. There were 4 bikes hanging on the wall. I mean, get out of it. They obviously don't care or they would have shut the garage. They've got too much money, they don't know what to do with it. I took the bike off it. This is last month's model. Now the new model's got 24 gears, and it's got Shimano brakes as well as Duralia, whatever, And he's saying, so the boy's going to come home. He's going to get home tonight. He's going to go. His bike's going to go on. He's going to go to Mum and say, Mum, someone's, and give her hell for 2 hours. Dad's going to come home, and Dad's going to say, don't worry, we'll buy another bike tomorrow. They're going to go out, and he's going to get the new, he's happy. He's just got an upgraded bike. 6 months later, he's had it for 6 months, he's got an upgraded bike. Now, Dad is going to make an insurance claim, but he's not just going to claim for that bike, is he? He's going to claim for the other old bike that he's now going to go and put down at the tip at the weekend. So he's going to get 2 bikes out of it. So probably his little sister's going to get a new bike as well, or the dad, or the mum. Everyone's done well. And the insurance company, I bet they're making loads out of this. I've done everyone a favor. An 11-year-old boy who's paying to keep his little brother, his little sister and his little brother alive, fed, shoed, at 11. Now, I actually couldn't argue with his reason. His reason's good, isn't it? In terms of argument, it's right. I know all our premiums are going to go up a little bit. And I know, it's not a good idea and everything. But, for 11 years old, I thought, interesting. I'd not looked at it that way. I'd made a dummy insurance claim. I knew about that, but I hadn't thought about the whole way through. So one of the things that struck me is that how much of our law is really designed to really stop that kind of thing. Because I then thought to myself, I was really concerned about Marcel, because I know lots of his friends had been in court. Many of them had ended up in the juvenile justice system. And most of the adults that he was around dealing drugs with would have done time in prison. So I'm thinking, I'm really worried that Marcel will be found out. Because the police will see a new bike, they'll stop him, they'll find the number. And while they may still now have their new bikes, Marcel will end up in trouble. And that's my concern. So I'm trying to explain it to him. He's going, Nick, they're not going to catch me. I know the streets. But, so he's got his argument. But what about the man who's just, I'm pretending, or the woman, that made the bogus claim on their insurance? When the police go around and then say, we found the bike, but there was only one, what's the second bike? And he goes, oh, we found the second bike. Who's going to prosecute them? Same amount of money, same lie, same cheat. It's exactly the same, isn't it? He stole a bike, an extra one, and we all know that happens. I'm making up a case because I don't know what they did, but it happens. But how many people do you think we prosecute for actually making fraudulent claims on their insurance? How many? How many do you see in the system? Compared with how many black kids do you see for stealing bikes? How many have we sent to juvenile justice for stealing bikes or something? Whose law is this anyway? Sure ain't Marcel's. So then I'm struck by this and thinking, this doesn't work. And I've been a stockbroker. I've been insider dealing. I'd seen every one of my colleagues insider dealing every day. And apart from a couple of big cases, Rivkin equivalents, yeah, we were immune. We knew that wasn't an issue. The law was not an issue for us. That's what you do. I remember after leaving the company that I was working on, because we had done some serious insider dealing, and leaving the company, going to the fraud squad, and the company getting closed down that I left, not just from my evidence, but from a bunch of people. Going to another bank, a very reputable bank in London, and saying, and at the end of my third interview, the person interviewing me saying, Nick, well done, we like that stand you made on that bucket shop. Good to get them out of the way. But you do understand we're dealing with the Japanese market here, and they do need to know a little bit up front to buy insider dealing. It's okay, it's a much more reputable bank. And we just want to check out that you're not going to be too finicky about this, because the Japanese market really does rely on you actually telling them what the shares are going to do, where the price is going to go. But of course, do we fear the law there? No. Does Marcel? Well, in some ways he doesn't. So then I'm struck by that, and I start asking myself questions as somebody who's not very learned, who thinks poverty is quite a simple thing. It's about charity. It's about rich people giving stuff to poor people. And I set up a service where you go and get a bed from somebody, and I would remember we'd go and collect second-hand furniture and we'd give it to other people. And I one day went to this woman. I went because a couple of the guys, and we had tough Liverpoolian guys out on trucks, They do though, don't they, mate? And they're off in the truck and they're delivering, and they come back, and two of these guys are in tears and just saying, we've just met this young woman. She's in a house. She's just come out of hospital. She's got a baby, and they've got nothing in the house. She's sleeping on the floor with a baby. And she wanted a bed, and we dropped the bed, one single bed, and that's it. There's nothing else in the house. And they're saying, come on, we're going to load it back up. Nick, you've got to go and take it. So they load up this truck, and I get back in the truck, and I go off, and I knock on this girl's door. I said, I've got a truckload of stuff, the guy said, and we have a conversation, I'm now crying, so there's a truckload of stuff. And she says to me, I don't want you to come in with your stuff. I don't want your stuff, because I'll put up with it. And my mother put up with it, and her mother put up with it. And I've got a baby, and the baby must have more than I had. So thank you, but if I only got this bed, I'm going to push. Interesting. So I start asking myself the question, what's justice and who's fair and what does fairness mean? And I had a friend, I was meeting people in Liverpool, and met this young guy, and he worked for the VAT, so the equivalent of GST department. That year we had taken to court in Great Britain a phenomenal figure. I can't remember how many people, but like 20,000 people had gone to court and had got some kind of fine or conviction or going to prison for first, second, third offense for cheating on their welfare. So, thousands, tens of thousands of people going through the court system for cheating for £100 or £200. So I asked him about, dabbling in the GST, avoiding it, paying cash to avoid GST. How many prosecutions did they make last year? And they said none. How many? I'll ask you in a minute. But none. Now, GST fraud is huge and big too. Companies actually avoiding tens of thousands of dollars. But we don't prosecute. Why is that? Why don't we prosecute there? Why aren't we interested there? Surely if it's about cheating and about having rules that work, we would be prosecuting there. We don't prosecute it. We don't prosecute. Why don't we do it there? But we do. Do you know we had, I wrote this down, I thought I'm going to forget. Oh no, that's just, that's a Lone Ranger somewhere here. We had 300,000 people were breached 2 years ago. 300,000 people were breached, and for not returning a letter, a Centrelink letter. 300,000 people were breached. And you know what a breach costs? A breach costs someone a low income, an income that is set to keep them poor so that they're keen to get a job, because you've got to keep them keen. Not that we've got any jobs for them or we can do anything about creating jobs for them, of course. That would be far too just. But we've got to keep them keen. So they're set at that level where they're going to stay poor. We took from them, for not returning a letter, 16% of their income as a minimum for 8 weeks. 16% of their income set at a minimum to survive for 8 weeks for not returning a letter. In the same year, we did this thing. It actually got in the press. It was kind of cute. But in the same year, John Howard didn't reply within the 20 days statutory federal government time for replying to letters of inquiry to government. Letters to John Howard's office alone, he didn't reply to 33,000 in that year within the 20 days. At 16% of his income for 8 weeks, that's 193 million. But of course, we don't care about that, do we? I mean, that's only what's going on in the country, and what our government are doing, and my right to know, and the time that is set for my right to know what's going on in the country and a right to reply. And of course, the 33,000, we can't expect that. We'd have how many of you got reasons going through your head for why poor Johnny couldn't have possibly written those 33? I mean, poor old Johnny. And yet, 300,000 people lost 16% for 8 weeks. People already struggling to make choices between bills and food. Justice. Laws, rules. Who are they for? So, when I arrived in this country, I took a job working for the diocese to look at chaplaincy, and as part of that job, I was part of the chaplain, and one of the chaplains I was responsible was the chaplain in juvenile justice just down here in Melbourne. And he left just as I started, a guy called Tony Jackson, extraordinary young man. So I said, I'll cover for you. So I had just 9 months of working in juvenile justice here in Melbourne. It's the nicest time I've had since I've been here, and I kind of miss it. And miss the stories, miss the liveliness of these young kids, miss the complete disrespect for this and everything else. And they're willing, it's like they wouldn't have sat here this long like you've sat. They'd have been saying, well, a lot of bollocks, crap, God's no good, and heroin's my God, and they'd have been straight there. I could feel like I could tell you anything, but very engaged, and I loved it. I just loved it, and I loved the music. I loved the language. I loved the fact of how they would stand alongside each other while you were facing them. As soon as you'd gone, they'd hit each other. It's like, I loved it. But one of the things that struck me about it is that I hadn't met any Indigenous people when I arrived, and then suddenly I was in the juvenile justice system, and you think Melbourne was Indigenous, Aboriginal. I mean, it just struck me. God, there's all these Indigenous kids. I didn't know we had any. And there's all this Indigenous art that they're doing when they're locked up. And, I couldn't believe it. One kid, while I was there, ran away for a funeral, and I lent him a tape the week before, and he took my tape as he ran away for this funeral. And then he came back after the funeral and gave me the tape back. I was just thinking about truth and how you can trust people. And, one of the things that I found out while I was there is that, it's 8 times more likely that if you're Indigenous than if you're white, that you'll do a custodial sentence as a juvenile. It was then. I don't know if that's still the case. That's 4 years ago. 8 times more likely for the same offense as a white person. And if you're a Vietnamese, 4 times more likely. Couldn't believe that. And yet if you look in there, you can see it. And so I thought I'd better check what the most recent statistics are on, how well we're doing. And a recent OECD comparison between 4 first world countries with Indigenous populations. So it was between US, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And the rate of Indigenous over-representation. So, how many more times are you more likely to go to prison if you're Indigenous than the rest of the population? And what was striking is that, because I was thinking maybe those things had changed, or maybe it's just unlucky it was a bad year in Melbourne, or, maybe I was just making it up, or the figure wasn't true. In the US, as an indigenous person, you're only 1.4 times more likely to do a prison sentence than the rest of the population. In Canada, you're 6 times more likely. In New Zealand, you're 8 times more likely than the rest of the population. In Australia, you're 14 times more likely as an indigenous person to do a custodial sentence. 14 more times. Do you know if you're an indigenous man, you're going to die 20 years younger than any of us? I've just spent some time with the Pearson brothers, and Gerhard has been saying, he is now nearly the oldest man in his family. He's still only got a 4-year-old child, and he's frightened because he's not going to see his children grow up. I've never even started to think of that. He's 5 years older than me. 20 years. In the other 3 countries, it's less than 10. 5, 6, and 7, or something like that. We are extraordinarily bad at being just. And yet we have all these rules. This fine building. We have your fine minds. But we are not just. So I want to push on you now. I was thinking about how do you push on lawyers? You kind of upset them a bit, or judges or whatever. You kind of do that sort of cross-examination. Well, tell me, what do you think? Who's your name? How do I push back just a little bit? And then I really wanted to ask the question, what do we do about it? And I thought we might have a conversation, because I have no idea. I'm not that fine a mind. But I think it's a question worth asking, do we do anything, or is it okay? Are we okay with the way it is? But the thing I thought I'd ask is, for whom here would it be an issue if they were doing something illegally? For whom here would it be an issue if they were doing something illegally and were benefiting financially by doing that? So if I found out, for example, that you were doing something, Tim, it was a bit illegal, and you're doing well out of it financially, do you think there would be some cost to your life, your position, and what you do? I'm asking you. You're saying yes. Yeah. Yes. Very good. Thank you, Tim. I'll use someone else next time. So do you get the question? So for whom here do you think it would be an issue if you were found out to be lying and financially benefiting from that lie? If you think it would be an issue for you, put up your hand. That's most of you. Okay, all of those that had their hand up are now playing. Okay, so you're in the game. If you put your hand down, I don't care about you, because you could say yes or no and it won't matter, will it? So for those of you who put up your hand, you've got to play, okay? So I want you to raise your right hand. Raise your right hand and say, I swear to tell the whole truth. No, come on, no, leave your hand up. I swear to tell the whole truth, come on. And nothing but the whole truth. So help me God, or whatever you believe in. No, you didn't have to say it like that. So help me God, or whatever you... Oh, never mind. Okay, so now that's a game, right? But I'm absolutely serious. I have your word, do I? I have your word. You're not saying yes. Yeah. Okay, I have your word. How many of you, within the last year, you or your family, someone close to you, you know that they paid for something, or you suspect they may have paid for something, cash, to avoid the GST? Please raise your hand. 7. You're very honest. Thank you. How many of you here, in your last tax thing, for those of you, and I know most of you are legal professionals, so most of you didn't do one, but for those of you who did do one, that was a joke. I hope the person who I read about isn't here, and I wouldn't know anyway. I'm from England. So for those of you who did one, who knows, absolutely knows, that everything that they did in there to maximize the amount of tax that they would get returned didn't tell the truth? You know that, put down laundry, put down dry cleaning. I mean, I've got a wig, haven't I? Put down $20 for the wig, getting it dry cleaned or whatever. So how many of you know, absolutely know, or suspect that when you said that to your accountant, they interpreted it in a way that probably couldn't be substantiated, knows that the information on there, really deeply explored, would have flaws? Put up your hand. 1, 2, 3. You're very honest, sir. And you're very honest. Thank you. 4. So we have about 7 or 8 last time, 4. How many of you this year got in a car when you or somebody else knew, when you knew that the person you were in the car with or you was over 0.5? Put your hand up. Okay. Just look at that. There's 6 hands there, right? 6 hands. And I'm the priest. So, I now want to ask you all a question. Everyone's in the game now. How many of you believe that at least one person in this room is lying? Put up your hand. You're still in the game, you're telling the truth. At least one person in this room is lying. Put up your hand, hold it up. How many of you think probably most people in the room have lied on one of those things? Put up your hand. No. Some, not most. So whose law is it? Whose rules are these? I'll take this off. Because I'm not really, I never wear it. It's only for you, Tim, just to, So, when you're next to a living treasure, you've got to put something on to give you a bit of weight, No, so I take it off because, it's like we dress up, don't we? We put on our clothes. We get in the position. We know right and wrong. We judge others with our right and wrong. You're going to heaven. You're going to hell. You're going out. You're going to prison. And yet, where we stand on our own word, we don't believe each other. Most of you in here believe at least some people in this room are liars. In here, of all places, it's like a church, temple to truth. No, not really, it's a game. A game maybe like the cynic said today, for the rich. I wrote down these words and I thought to myself, does this sum it up? Where did I keep putting my speech? Let's go on again. Oh, over there. Here it is. I only had about 8 words on it, so I think this is probably the last one I have to refer to. You earn from it, but you don't abide by it, at least some of you, and you judge others with it. Whose is it? Because I don't believe you. If we'd asked those figures outside, or you were anonymously, half the rooms in their hand would have gone up for every one of those. Most of you have got in the car in the last year with somebody who's drunk too much. You didn't ask, didn't question it, like you didn't your accountant who put down some of the things on your form. Most of you. I did. I have. I think probably on all 3. Because I did dry cleaning. I got dresses. I get dresses in my precious. Oh yeah, probably it was that. I said to him, it's what? It's $50. I said, probably. It would have been better to have said nothing, because then at least I wouldn't have lied. And I wouldn't have saved the $2.50 or whatever it was that I saved. So I'm culpable here. I'm with you, okay? But in this thing with the Tonto, which I didn't know about until it came, and then I thought it was kind of cute, it says crusader or criminal. So as the bunch of people who don't believe amongst ourselves that we can really tell the truth, and yet we judge from that position, who's the criminal and who's the crusader? John Howard's 197 million versus the amount of people that couldn't feed their children because of the way we interpret our rules. And it said on here, this thing, this is meant to be the Lone Ranger saying this, I've read it just now. In being prepared physically, mentally, and morally to fight when necessary for that which is right. But when I put $20 for my cassock to be dry cleaned, when I don't think I've ever had it dry cleaned, because the accountant says, you just stick down something there, you will have done it, and I say yes, because I'm not really thinking, and I'm already 3 years late for the tax return anyway. Am I physically ready? Am I mentally ready? Is my conscience clear? Am I being conscious about who I am and what I do? Because if I'm not, how able am I? As Father Nick Francis, MBE, Brothers not, or whatever that stuff is. How able am I to fight when necessary for what is right? So I don't think the law is fair. I've seen too many indigenous people now in prison. I was chaplain of prisons and I didn't like what I saw. I don't like the fact that if 2 people were driving home tonight, one of them is hooning their way down as an 18-year-old, and they're always hooning their way down, and they get caught doing 5 miles over the speed limit because they just slowed down to go around a corner. they get a $60 fine. And the woman who's been driving for 20 years and never has done anything is going 5 kilometers an hour faster because she's just avoided something that was in the road, and at the same time a child walked out and the child's just got run over and the child's now dead. Is that, what do you call it, culpable manslaughter or something? I don't know what the words are, but can you end up with, why? Why is that $20 and I'm just going to get it in the post? And why is now this woman's life going to be changed? I mean, who's better for that? And why did we make those rules? Who's better? And we know everything says if you put this person in prison, not this person, but any person, it ain't going to help anybody. It's just going to cost us a lot of money, unless unless we've got to keep them out of society because they're going to hurt somebody. But that's not most of the people that are there. So I don't know. So those are my questions. I don't think we're fit for the task that we need to be fit for. I don't think we question it enough. I don't think we can question Indigenous issues enough. I don't think we question ourselves as we prepare ourselves for this fight. I don't think we actually really think enough, because I think we do care, but I don't think we think enough to care about the fact that the people that suffer from our rules are the people that don't look like us. They're not the people getting rich from this. They are not the people that are represented in this. And they are the people that are suffering from it. Is there something we can do? Or is that just the way it is? Because in some ways in this room there would be those people that would know how to change it, and I don't. But I'd like to have that conversation. And we've got a bit of time to do that. So would anyone like to? I mean, I don't mind, we'll take some questions, or make a comment, but I think rather than, when I started, I said I'm not qualified to speak. I certainly, I feel qualified to get something happening, and so now it's got to happen. So that's down to you, or not. Or a question, or comment. You're going to have to ask. There's a thing, isn't there? Do that. And if you like, it's a feedback thing. If you'd like to, you could introduce yourself, and then people would know who you are.
My name's.
It's.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah. My name's Tony Lupton. I'd like just to ask Nick if you would expand a little bit on what took you from being chair of the Conservative Party at the Polytechnic to the views that you're expressing today, because I think a lot of the answers to the questions you're asking are about what we do as individuals and how we change and realise what people's circumstances are and how we react to that. So I'd just be interested to know what it was about your personal experience that brought that to you.
It's interesting, you always know when the person at the front who's going to be giving you a thank you speech is asking a question. He's doing it out of obligation. But thank you for the question. Thank you. Well, I think, there's a time, there was a particular time in my life when my father had just gone public. His company had just gone public, and it meant that he was personally worth £20 million. It's a lot of money, isn't it? It's $50 million or something. And I, it was extraordinary, and I was working, and I was thinking, how can I ever, because my grandfather was this prisoner of war from working class family, he made the million, invested it in my dad when he retires, my dad turns it into 50, or 20. How am I going to do it? How am I going to prove to my granddad? My dad was only 18, my dad and mum met at Butlins, mum got pregnant, they got married, so dad didn't get shot, and so they were very young. And so my grandfather was a real sort of bringer-upper of me, a really big influence. And so I got this moment where I'm thinking, how can I get their love? And by that time, my grandfather's died. How am I going to be good enough? And I realize I'm on this trying every day, and I'm on the phone to this guy, and I'm selling shares. It's like I've got to get there quicker. The reason I'm taking a stockbroker is because I think it's the way to make most money. And I think money's important. I believed all the Thatcher stuff. It makes the world go round. This is the free market. It's going to, create jobs. And the truth is, we were slashing jobs, breaking things up, selling anyway. But I believed it, and so I thought I was doing that. But truthfully, underneath that, there was something about if I can prove it, if I can really show I'm successful, then they're going to go, "That's Nick, my son," and then I'm going to be loved. I'm thinking, but I don't feel loved. So I'm racing. going out at night, drinking champagne, right clubs, looking like the boy, you know, getting up each day and saying, who are you? And, you know, thinking, oh, all that sort of stuff. And then there came a point where I'm going to work one day, and we do these deals, and I pick up the telephone, and we've just done this deal. We bought a company, effectively, for about 5 pence a share. We knew it was going back. Oh, we bought it for no pence a share, you know, almost no pence a share, because it was going to go bust in 2 weeks' time. And then we sold all of these shares that we bought for nothing, for 5 pence, on the promise that we're going to go up. It's completely illegal. That's why the company's closed down. So all these people that were coming thinking, oh, this sounds like a good, cheap little stock, and we as brokers were told this story, and we were telling the story. Unbeknownst to us, we owned the stock, and the story was a lie. 2 weeks later, the thing goes bankrupt. This guy's on the phone to me, and he's, I guess he's 65, and he's on the end of the phone, and he's saying, and he's crying. He's absolutely crying. He's saying, what happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? And I'm just there. You know, I'm going in the next day. I'm making a deal. It's like, I'm going to Paris this weekend. I've got to sell some shares. I'm going, you know, we're really partying this weekend. We're hiring Porsches or whatever, you know, the game is. So I'm not listening to anybody. I don't hear anyone on the phone. I'm too busy for that. I'm going somewhere. And this guy's in tears. It's like, I can't hear him. So it's like, what happens is I suddenly realize I can't hear him. I'm not even listening. This man really is hurting. Actually, this could be my granddad. And all of a sudden, all the game, I'm just listening to this man. And I think in my heart, I don't really know. It's like the questions I was asking before. Well, I don't really know whether they did or they don't, so I'll do it anyway. You know, it's like, what's it got to do with me? And this man is saying, I put everything. I didn't tell my wife everything. I put everything in. I worked as a civil servant, you know, 40 years, or I can't remember how many years he said, but all his life. It's all there. It was all in it. I thought I'd just quickly double it. And I can't do anything. I can't say anything. He's lost everything. And so I cover the phone piece over. I say to a colleague of mine opposite, look, this guy's funny. He's lost everything. He brought Death Ledger. What do I do? And he said, stick him into something else. I said, you don't get it. He's lost everything. He said, he's lost everything. He can't tell anyone. He'll borrow. Stick him into something else. I'm sat there with his phone. He's kind of like, you know, God, what are you going to do, Nick? And I give the phone to the guy. I say, I got to go. I don't speak to the man anymore. I walk to my boss. I say, what did we do with Death Ledger? Did we do that? And my boss at the floor boss goes, Nick, I'm not, you know, crazy. So I walk from his boss up the floor. I speak to his boss, and I say, what did we do on Death Ledger? And he says, Nick, you're crazy. And the interesting thing is this company is just launched, my father's company was listed with this company. So my father was really quite tied into this company at this stage too. And then I went to the general manager of the company CEO and said, what did we do with Death Ledger? And he said, Nick, you know, he said, well, it is, man, it's the game. And I turned around, I left. I phoned my dad and said, Dad, I'm going to the fraud squad. I went to the fraud squad. When I came back, I was going to the fraud squad. My dad said to me at this point, my dad and I are best friends now. We have this extraordinarily, I mean, I would count him as my best mate. But at this point, he says, Nick, don't worry about it. Anything that you want to do, I'll fund. Just get back into the profit motive. Those were his exact words. I'll fund, get back into the profit motive. Get back into the game, our game, the one where we know the rules. So I leave, go to the fraud squad. I tell the story to the fraud squad. I walk out. I go home. A couple of things happen over a couple of weeks. My father disinherits me. My mother stops talking to me. My brothers don't come to my wedding. We're in a very different place now. I mean, my brothers, and I'm going back to England next week to go and hang out with my brothers and have a beer and stay with my dad. I'm in a very different place now. But at that point, making a stand, just, you know, being fit for something, cost me the only things and everything that I had been in the game for. And so I started learning, and I went to the poorest place in Britain, which was Liverpool, and lived in the YMCA. I got up one morning, and there was a man hanging outside my room. I remember just dead, hanging. He hung himself. And I lived for a year in the poorest place I could find in Great Britain, just because I realized I didn't know. I'd been playing a game, and the game was costing lives, and I wanted to know. I didn't want to be lonely anymore. Do I perceive it as racist? I can hear you, but I think others won't. Do you mind if you... It's on you. Just got to speak right into the end.
You were talking about Indigenous Australians, and
Yeah.
I just wondered, do you perceive the justice system as racist, or do you just think that Indigenous Australians are in the poverty trap, the same as a lot of white Australians are?
I think there is no doubt in my mind that the justice system is racist, from the police through to the courts. I can't explain why you're 8 times more likely to go do a prison sentence as an Aboriginal kid than you are a white kid for the same offence. I can't understand. I mean, I'm not saying that we're racist, but we're racist, you know? It's like I came here to this multicultural society because I was leaving Britain where I saw this racism, because I was coming to this great multicultural society, and what I realized is, look where the unemployment is, and then look at the race of the people who are unemployed. And look at the fact that we send videos of crocodile-eating people, people eating crocodiles to Indonesia or wherever it is to stop people coming here, and yet we've got 60,000 people from Ireland and England here, came on tourist visas and aren't going back. 60,000 of them. They're all working. They're all our brothers and sisters and mates and friends. They're living in our houses. We're not dobbing them in, are we? That's not who the welfare sector's wanting. That's not where we're, they didn't come on a boat. They came on a holiday. But they look like us. They're not Muslims. Yes, we're racist. I reckon. I mean, I've got no other reason to explain it.
I'd just like to make a comment.
Yes.
In relation to the judicial system, I personally believe that the system isn't racist.
Isn't?
Yeah, and
you
I
can
actually,
speak better than me.
and I actually, like some people here that I know who've come, am committed and very to the progress of the legal system in that respect, and in a social justice respect. And I feel that the issues in relation to the Indigenous population can't be seen in isolation in view of what the law is doing, because the law is working within a wider web where you've got social structures, you've got the community, you've got politicians and parliamentarians writing the law within which we work. And being an advocate, I feel that very strongly an optimistic outlook about what our courts are doing and what our judges are doing and what advocates and prosecutors and defence lawyers are doing. And in relation to the Indigenous population, I think it has to be seen, and I'm just wondering whether you also share this view that there's the law, but there's also the community structures that have to be taken into account and community views. So you'll get an example where you'll see an Aboriginal child, whom I represented, for example, who's 17, up for an armed robbery because they stole a bike and a lemon juice, because he wants to go to adult jail because no one's at home, so he can be with his elders. So that's a situation which might reflect on the statistics. It's a unique situation perhaps, but it just shows that the law might be working, but we're in some ways limited because it has to be seen in a wider circle.
Who is it that
Sorry
said...
for talking so long.
But who was it then that said, if that's the case, the law's an ass? Who said that? I mean, I don't know who said it, but isn't there a saying? Someone saying, but then the law... Sorry? Dickens, was it? There we go. I should be better read. So, and I hear what you're saying, but then wouldn't it be ridiculous if we were actually putting that young child, because he's got no one at home, in prison with other people, knowing what prison does to people? So, wouldn't a society that loved, that was about justice, would define a way to get some elders out and not to play the game? I mean, yes, I get that the interpretation of the law might be right, but how is that good for society? Why is it that 16, was it, what did I say? 14 or 16 times, twice as many as any other Indigenous community in America, Canada, or New Zealand is doing a crime? Is that because our Indigenous population is bad? I don't believe that. And if it is that they're bad, then what is it that we have done in such a short time that makes that true? Where is our responsibility in this? Not to define the law, but to take responsibility for the situation as people of the law. I mean, I don't know if is that subtle, or is that, I mean, I'm struggling here. I'm just stood up. Yes. Did you put your hand up? Somebody else could run the mic here, and then I could. Do you want to do that? Great, thanks.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and you're giving me lots of ideas. I'm just a student and just at the beginning of this journey of getting into the law and finding out what it's all about. But the more I learn and the more I hear about what you say, I kind of wonder, is this the best way to fix these problems? Like, where do you go? Where do you even start? Where do you get ideas to start looking at how to correct so many wrongs that are in our society? And I was just wondering if you had any suggestions.
No, we might just take this other question. No, I don't. I mean, I kind of do and I don't, but let's just keep going a little bit. I don't about the law. I'm not clever enough, you know. I don't know enough. But you do. Yeah.
It's just a continuation, actually, of what was just said. And I, too, am a law student, and I'm just embarking on my journey through the system, I guess you could call it. And I just wonder whether you think it's a problem to do with the legal system, or whether it's a problem to do with society as a whole. Is the reason why there is such a great number of Indigenous people in custody at the moment, is it because of the way the legal system is treating them, or is it because of something greater on a greater social scale? Is it that they have done nothing and they've been misjudged by the legal system, or is it something that they have actually done that is legally conceived to be wrong, but they've been driven to that by other social factors?
I think it's probably the second, isn't it? But then the question is, how do we have the law that's over here that allows you to tell your lies today but benefit from the law and then administer law to others and then go home and be comfortable and know that actually the likelihood of any of your children doing custodial service because of who you know, what you know, and the amount that you can afford is probably nil, whatever they do, as opposed to, you know, the case that faces somebody who's in poverty. Is that fair? Are you okay with that? I mean, it seems to me we are okay with it because it doesn't change, because we build it as the law. It's precious. We stand on it. But who stands on it? And who is it upholding? That's the question I'm wanting to ask you, because it doesn't seem to be good for us all. And for some, it seems to be extraordinarily harsh. So I think your question's a good question, but I actually wonder if they're so separate. And it's interesting, when we just ask this question, it's the younger ones of you that are asking the questions that will say something, and the others are either too wise or, so I don't know the answer. Ask them. Here you go, there's some grey in a beard. That must count for something.
I think in one fell swoop we spiritually impoverish a lot of these people, and in that same fell swoop we make a complete set of problems. The law is what it is, but it's also a mechanism that helps us engage those people, and if we engage them with empathy and with a generous spirit ourselves, that's helpful. But at least the law is the mechanism that actually helps us engage them. And where we go from there, by my observation, is where the fruit is. I think that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. Well, that makes sense to me in terms of being a priest. So what I'd say my experience of a priest is that the priest gives me a place to be. It's where I say, hey, I'm hanging out for love here. That's what I'm for. I'm going to try and not make you wrong. I'm going to try and push you a bit, but I'm not going to make you wrong. And I'm wanting to see if together we can make more love. That's all I'm here for. Hey man, born in the 60s. Could I just get you? So there's one at the back for that gentleman too. So I'm hanging out for that. But the interesting thing for me is I'm part of a club. I'll get it back to you. Somebody stole it. I'm part of a club where most of my colleagues, when I was training, they called me the Buddhist because I say that stuff about Mary and Little Earth. So they said, you shouldn't be ordained. There were 4 or 5 people, every time I spoke, prayed that I might find Jesus. I remember saying to one of them, if you ever do that for me again, I'm going to punch your lights out. It's like, because the truth is, I don't see Jesus as somebody who wanted people in the club. I see Jesus as somebody who was standing there for others. I don't see him saying, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. He's saying, you're in, baby. This is love. And yet we have these priests who have a possibility of holding the tensions that we all face in our lives, the fact that there's pornography on sale by every till in a garage. Who's reading this stuff? Because they wouldn't put it so close to the till unless we were. The most hits on a computer are to see pornographic sites. It's like, that's our world. We need people who can help us make sense of that, not people who can say, this God's better, and if you believe mine, you're going to heaven, and if you believe in this one, you're going to go to hell. We don't need that. We got enough of that crap in the world. We need people who are saying, love, I'll help you to love. This is the book I use. I follow this guy. Who do you follow? Great. Oh, yeah, he's nice. I like the little fat one that sits down. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about how we love. I mean, there'll be some people here who I know would massively think that that's sacrilegious or irreverent, but I am.
Nick, I work with a welfare organisation, and we're dealing with people who live on or below the poverty line every day. I disagree with you. I think the law is the end product of social injustice. Okay, it begins with young children who are living in flats with parents who are drug addicted or have other problems. They do not know a life other than what they're trying to cope with every day. They're very vulnerable. It needs to start with school children, with very young children learning self-esteem, learning that it doesn't have to be that way. And the law is the end product. It's the result of those children going through that, mostly. Yeah. There may be exceptions to that.
I don't think I talked about that, but I think I agree with you. But I do think the law has a response in the way that it deals with people that might allow us to get back to that rather than just stay at the problem at the end.
20 years ago, or thereabouts, I was involved in doing something called the Pitjantjatjara Land Rights Act in South Australia. It was probably the most important thing I've done in my life. For 20 years, that act seems to have survived, and what it was about was giving that group of people in the northwest of South Australia the opportunity, in a sense, to determine their own future on their own lands. The work that was done to produce that act involved an extraordinary effort on the part of people in politics, people in anthropology, people in law. I was involved on the government side, working for a Liberal government. On the other side, obviously, were the Pitjantjatjara people, and their lawyer was Ron Caston, who's probably very well respected by people in this room. The reason I'm sounding a bit emotional is that I've had a tough week this week. In the Australian, there was a report that because of the glue sniffing on the Pitjantjatjara lands, the government is taking that act in South Australia, which was agreed between the then government and the Pitjantjatjara people, and are going to amend it to take away that right of self-government or self-administration that it was at least partially conferred by the Act. I think one has to recognise the right of the government and the parliament, if it goes along with the government, to do that. The reason for talking in the way that I am about this, I suppose, is I want to challenge, I think, what you've said about none of us really wanting to address these issues. There's an extraordinary willingness in all sorts of groups in the community, on all sorts of sides of politics, to try and get the right outcomes. You said, I think, somewhere in your remarks, either that it's very hard or that you didn't know what the answers are. You can see the questions. I think that's the problem. I think we can see wrongs that we need to try and get right, but finding the model that stands the test of time is just extraordinarily difficult. It's not so long ago that Fred Chaney was saying how difficult it had been when he was Minister for Aboriginal Affairs to try and get the right outcomes for Redfern in Sydney and the so-called block, which also involved self-administration by Indigenous people of property of theirs, but a block of a building rather than a vast tract of land. Look, I think that's all I want to say, but if the assumption on which you're working is that we're all sort of letting these issues glaze over us and don't care and don't want to come up with the right answers, we do. But it's very, very hard, and it's challenged us across generations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have to stop, I think. 2 minutes. So then maybe just this lady here, and then we'll take your question last. No, you. Yes, you do. That'll help. And then we'll stop. There you go. Thank you.
I think, just following on from your comments, I think that a lot of us struggle in different environments to meet some of those challenges around social justice. I was a lawyer 10 years ago. I moved into the health area because I thought that that was where I could make a more creative solution than working in the law. And I think that what actually is required, I think our community has become very divided and people have become very alienated in our community, and it is fairly easy to divide the differences. And I think that some of the solutions involve getting a multi-dimensional approach to the issue. So people who are, you know, my clients that I dealt with in health, exactly the same clients that I dealt with as a lawyer. And so I think that there is a need for communities to take responsibilities for the issues and to work together and to bring together a range of different skills to actually try to address some of those issues. And I think that some of the most innovative models are where communities have actually been able to tackle some of those issues.
I think that's a really good point. And we just did a piece of work last year with the health department, with the health part of the uni. And we took year 4 students, about 60 of them, at the Brotherhood. And then they worked for a day a week for, I think, about 4 months on a program. And just hearing those young people's stories at the end of that time about how I might apply what I'm learning and what it's going to mean, it was extraordinary. And so I think that thing about how do we have lawyers having their time out, and how do we have them working with students of health and students of art, and actually knowing that it is a multi-dimensional question. There's no doubt that it's not simple. And just to respond to you, sir, I was really, I was frightened about coming, and the faces that I imagined in my fear are not the faces I see, of course. And I did want to push because it's okay to be pushed. You know, as a priest, it's my job a little bit to say, not to tell you all that by giving us $5, the world's going to be a better place, and now you can go home and do the same as you were yesterday. My job is partly to say, let's be uncomfortable. You know, as a Christian, Jesus was uncomfortable. You know, he ended up giving his life for making that stand. So we can always do a bit more. And all of us, start here. But I would say that I really, of course, you're here because you're interested in these things. You chose this profession because you're passionate about these things. And I love, honor, and respect that choice that you've made. There's a Hindu greeting, it's namaste. And it's simple, really, and people say it all the time. I love it. And just walking past each other, namaste, namaste, namaste. And there's a translation for it, which is that I love, honor, and respect the light and the life that shines from within you. So I love, honor, and respect the light and the life that shines from within you. Thank you. Please let it shine. Namaste.
I've been asked to give the thanks to Father Nick Francis for delivering the 2004 Costello lecture. Nick, I made the mistake today of preparing some notes in anticipation of what you might say. And I have to say that the words I prepared sound extremely hollow. I don't have answers to the questions you've posed tonight, and I don't have solutions to the issues you've highlighted. But what I do know is to those here tonight who are still studying law and haven't yet embarked on their careers, that you must not lose faith in the system of legal justice we have in this country. It is still a strong system of law. What you need to do is put your heads down and work out the solutions through practising law. The former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Phillips, used to give a very standard speech at the admission of new barristers and solicitors, and many of you will have heard it over the years. One of the things he said in that speech, though, and I can't quote the words exactly, but it was to the effect that the legal profession is not an enclave, and that we have a much wider responsibility to the community as a whole. I think if anything comes out of tonight, it is the recognition that as lawyers, we do owe a responsibility to society to deal with these sorts of issues and to try and find solutions to them in the next years and decades to come. Nick, thank you very much for tonight. It's been thought-provoking, it's been challenging, and we've all thoroughly enjoyed it. Would you join me with me in thanking Father Nick Francis? And I'd invite all of you to join us for a drink at the rear when we finish. Thank you.